apologize in advance. I'm not feeling too well, but I wanted to make this video because something happened that was interesting to watch. At the same time, it is frustrating to watch. You'll figure it out as we go along. So let's start by telling you that the person that I'm talking about today is somebody that posted something on social media, and at first glance, I had no clue who this person was because I didn't recognize the name. And the name of this person is Scott Adams. Now, when I was younger, and keep in mind, I got married a month after I turned 21, and I came to the United States, lived here for 9 years, went back to Puerto Rico, then came back here. When my favorite part of Sunday newspapers was always the comics. Now, if you're not familiar with newspapers because you watch them all online, we used to have these gigantic pieces of paper that had all the news, and in the middle of one of the sections you would find, if you got lucky, you got two, but at least one, you would get an entire stack of comics, and it was its own little section in the newspaper. Eventually it became two sections. There was Dagwood, it was Betty Boop, Snoopy. There were so many, and you're seeing them now because I'm posting images as I find them. But the thing about it is, there was one that was called Dilbert. And Dilbert was about this guy that worked in a cubicle in an office, and you could relate to it. But for example, I would read other things that I found funny, like, oh God, there were so many of them though. Charlie Brown to me was cute, but Snoopy was funny. Okay? There was Dagwood was kind of funny, especially after I got married, because I realized the whole joke behind the joke. There were many. Garfield was hilarious. Calvin and Hobbes was one of my favorites. Yes, Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes were my two favorites. There was, in Spanish, Mafalda was hysterical. There was a lot of really funny stuff on Salt. I can't remember the name of. It was these little kids in the house, and it was always one circle, and it had the joke. It was the equivalent of what a meme would be now, okay? And so then you had all these other comics. And yes, you had Superman, and you had all the... Dick Tracy was a big one. But the majority of them were just cute and funny. Then you had Dilbert. Dilbert was more... There was another one, and if I remember the name of it, I'm going to post it right here, the image, so you know who I'm talking about. That one was political. Dilbert was more office politics. The one I'm talking about was absolutely political. All of them had their moments, but for me, Dilbert was not as funny. I just thought it was interesting, especially after I started working, because I could relate to what they were saying. Not always, but sometimes. And so when I saw that this person posted something on social media, and because I know that he has a very bad reputation, I decided to see what he said. And so I read to you what he said. Women don't understand that the Civil War already started. Men live in a continuous state of violence. We size up every threat and have a tentative plan to kill it first. We live that war and it never stops. And I'm assuming kill it first is metaphorical, but when you know the history behind the guy, you might be considering whether or not it is. The battle to defend Texas and the homeland is already in full throw. Decisions have been made. Men on each potential side have evaluated the threat and gamed out the outcomes in their minds. I don't expect American men in uniform to start shooting at each other. We've gained that out, no win. I do expect Biden to back down. His handlers will game it out the same. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about what he said about politics themselves and the whole Texas thing. That's for political experts to address. There is another video that is going to touch on the Texas thing, but not for the reasons you think. But what I found very interesting was this thing about women. Now, he's talking about violence in general, not necessarily towards women, but the fact that he mentioned women first, as if we are the only ones who are talking on social media about this whole civil war that's supposed to be happening between Texas and the rest of the United States. I have to tell you that the fact that he brought up women concerns me. Then again, when you see all the other reasons why he's potentially been in trouble and why he's problematic, you start seeing connections to it. And here's the thing. When I first saw this, I was like, is he talking about white women? Because the rest of us already know. But then I started thinking back. There are countless posts, videos, reels, shorts, TikToks, where women are talking about how insecure or how afraid they are when they're out in public and there are men that they don't know around them, and even sometimes men that they do know. There have been some men that have made videos where they notice that women change as soon as they walk by, and they've realized how damaged the woman's psyche is, that every man is a potential threat. I can tell you from personal experience that I feel like I'm old, so it doesn't matter as much. But when my daughter is with me, I'm very vigilant about who's around me. So that whole concept about him being about violence and how we've game it out and we kill first and all this other stuff, it can be taken metaphorically or realistically. As far as metaphorically, men love to put women down, which is why I'm bringing the second tweet that I'm going to show you that is not related to him, but that is going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Because this morning I woke up to this thing that said the following. It's a quote tweet of somebody saying Taylor Swift AI going crazy, and it has two images, two sexualized images of Taylor Swift, and it said, and the person that quote tweeted this said 150,000 likes on this effing filth. Are there no boundaries you cretins won't cross? What has porn and pseudo-masculine what is it? I can't say that word. Troglodytes? Like Andrew Tate done to you. Genuinely effing repulsive. One day you'll be old and you will have no friends to grieve. You'll be buried alone. And Howling Mutant under it said, it's hard to explain, but the fact that she probably hates these images being out there makes it hotter. What? So then my hero, Aviddiva, said, it's actually not hard to explain. Men have a humiliating women kink because they hate women and find excitement in publicly putting them down and making them feel uncomfortable. It is pleasurable to make women suffer. Thank you for explaining sexual violence so concisely. And I was thinking about that and I was like, yeah, that's pretty much what it is. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a group of men that traffic on making a lot of money out of making men treat women like their property and nothing else. Then they're surprised, the men that fall under this spell, then they're surprised when women don't take them seriously, don't want to be anywhere near them, and are afraid of them. We're not even talking about actual violence of beating the crap out of a woman, which we all know they're capable of. We're talking about the fact that men treat women like things and not like people, and then they are surprised when women don't want to mate with them, don't want to hang out with them, don't even want to have breakfast, lunch, coffee with them. I didn't grow up in a society that outwardly showed this contempt for women. So when I was growing up, I would go out, hang out with my friends, male or female, and I didn't have a problem. But we now have a situation where, thanks to social media, we know exactly what you're thinking. And what you're thinking, based on these guys that you idolize so much, is not pretty. And it's not going to lead you. And the funny thing is that all these men are like, well, you guys don't want to be with nice guys. You're not a nice guy if you think a woman is a property or a thing for you to possess. That's the part that you're not getting through your head. You might not ever beat her. You might not ever, in front of other people, humiliate her. But the fact that you consistently think about her as a possession or a thing, this is why this whole thing about traditional wives is so scary. Because at the end of the day, you have a bunch of women who are actually agreeing with this man that, yeah, we're supposed to be under the man, not just physically, but in every other aspect. The reality is this. The last time I looked at the Bible, because a lot of you like to go with Christianity, the last time I looked at the Bible, it said men and women were created equally. You can go with the whole thing about the rib and the whole 9 yards. The bottom line is that he created a man and a woman. He didn't create 10 men and 1 woman. He didn't create a man to own a woman. I mean, think about it. If God, according to your logic, really wanted women to be possessed and to be just the slave of the man and whatever, he wouldn't have given us the ability to actually bear and have the children. That is the number one job, according to you all. So you want to take the person that is capable of giving you somebody else in your life to take care of and to bring up and to raise into a good member of society. You're giving that person that is the only way that you're going to be able to procreate. Oh yeah, that's the one that you're going to treat like crap. What? Anyway. So, somebody, in another comment in Avatar's account, I saw something that really bothered me, and it said, you think hundreds of thousands of sexual assault sympathizers are bad? What about the hundreds of thousands of armed robberies, shootings, and stabbings? Seems like I'm far more justified than you are. Maybe it's wrong to condemn the majority with the minority's actions? And Abattoir answered, I live in Quebec, where the majority of violent crimes are committed by white men. And yet, I don't even come close to showing as much hostility towards the men I share my world with as you show towards women and BIPOC people. And here's the thing, and it's very frustrating to live in this world that I live in right now, because I am very much aware that in my world there's a thing that was called, at that time it was called male chauvinism, okay? It never was as violent and as vile as it is right now. And I'm going to tell you why. Male chauvinists, and by the way, I live with some, so I know. Male chauvinists basically said that a woman could not have a job like, for example, construction, because she was going to get dirty and sweaty. A woman should not work in a line, in a factory, because she would get dirty and whatever. Okay? You have to understand why women started working in factories. It had to do with the whole war and men fighting in the field, and women finally figure out, you know, this whole story that we cannot do the same thing that men do is not true. We can work just as hard as they can and whatnot. Male chauvinism has always existed, but not in the same plane, in my opinion, than it does now. Because now, it's not just the fact that you only want women to look pretty and have children and be the ones running the household and whatnot. No, you just want women to be subservient to you in all aspects of life. Seen and not heard has gone from being for the children, which never was, to being for the wives. Last time I looked, I was gifted, whether you believe in God or not, I was gifted with a brain to think. And I'm not talking about me specifically, I'm talking about women in general. We were gifted with a brain. We were gifted with muscles and bones. We were gifted with a lot more than the ability to make you feel good about being a man. And I'm talking to heterosexual males right now. I'm not talking about women. even though we know way too many of them who subscribe to the same theories these men do, okay? Abusing women, treating women like crap in general. And by the way, don't think that because you've never laid hands on a woman, you're not abusive. Your language, your behavior, the way you look at a woman, all of these things contribute to your abusing of women just for the sake of being women. And that has to stop. You have a presidential candidate who already was a president, and we've had several, but I'm talking about this one in particular, who actually just got fined $83 million for defaming a woman. Because for some reason you think it's okay to trash women with the truth and with lies. You think it's your right to touch a woman, and I'm not even talking about private parts or anything. You think it's okay for you to stand close to a woman and touch her just because you're a man and she's a woman. No. And, you know, it's funny because I remember a time about, I want to say it was about 20 years ago, when people who were disabled started telling the not disabled people not to help them, that they wanted to be able to do things for themselves. And it became this whole thing about don't even bother touching or talking to a person that's disabled to help them cross the street or whatever unless they ask you, which I think it should be somewhere in the middle of the reality, but let's use that as an example. And everybody subscribed to that theory that, you know, unless a person asks, don't offer, blah, blah, blah. We've gone through this whole thing where if you go to the school, you cannot even hug your school children because it might be considered something that is not, okay? You have all these other rules created that have basically taken all our ability to be human with each other, okay? The problem is that now we are living in a world where you feel the need to do it out of spite. I'm going to give you a very simple example of this. Before the panini, people would go ahead and sneeze like this into their elbow so that they wouldn't spread germs. After the panini, people are openly sneezing and coughing without covering their mouth just to spite people who are afraid of the panini. Make it make sense. You want to claim that you're a Christian human or a good person, but you're doing all the things, passive-aggressive things many times, to spite people just because you want to. Make that make sense. Women are afraid of you for very legitimate reasons. The things you say, the things you do, the way you look at women, it's enough for us. And I'm not talking about admiring somebody that's pretty. It's okay if you look. But there's a difference between just looking and staring at her like, oh my God, look at that girl. If I had that, I would do. Why? Why? And don't take me wrong. I know that some women do the same thing. That's another topic for another day. Today I'm talking about men and how they use the worst language to refer to women, and then they're surprised when women don't respond positively to them. If I had $1 for every time I read a post where a man is complaining that a woman doesn't want to be with him or doesn't want to hang out with him, and then not even 10 seconds later he's expressing how he behaves around women, and you're like, and you're surprised? I remember one time I read this post on Ask Aubrey, and if you want to see a lot of painful points shown, follow Ask Aubrey on social media. I remember I read one of the many posts she had where this guy was complaining that his friends would not hook him up with their girlfriends. His female friends would not hook him up with their female friends. Well, honey, If you act the way you acted on that post, and I'm not gonna like put words in the guy's mouth because I don't really remember what it is that he said, but I do remember that as soon as I read what he said, I was like, wow, that's a red flag. If your friends who love you are not helping you find a mate, that is a signal to you that you are not a good man. And they're smart enough not to want to put any of their friends through that. And that takes some self reflection. You might not be intending to be a bad man, but your behavior says different. It's kind of like when somebody says, well, I'm not racist because I have black friends, but then not only is that statement just cringy as hell, but then you watch their behavior. For example, they have a birthday party at their house. There's one black person, everybody else is white. They go to work in a place where it's predominantly white, and that might not be their fault, but they don't help anybody else from any other race get ahead. Their children cannot date outside of their race. They go to a church where that is predominantly white, or, and I've seen this, the church has services for white people and then it has services for other people, and I'm not going to be specific, and they only go to the white services for the white people. And don't tell me it doesn't happen, because the excuse of language is a great excuse for showing you discrimination in churches. Oh, we have the English mass and then we have the Spanish mass. I'm not going to get into that now. But there's a lot of discrimination that comes from that. And I'm not saying don't offer services in Spanish. I'm saying that you need to find a way as a church to unite those two groups somehow. One example, which I've seen done, I have seen churches that have taken the Spanish community and given them free Spanish lessons. Free English lessons. And if people who speak English are interested in learning Spanish, they also give them free Spanish lessons so they can communicate with their Spanish counterparts. That is one example of something that churches should do. Because guess what? Churches are not just supposed to make money. You're supposed to provide services for your community. And nothing would help American people learn the ways better than to teach them English when they're in the United States. I'm just saying. But I digress. The bottom line is this. You see behavior that you might consider is normal, but upon further study, you might realize that you're not as nice a person as you think you are. And that's really important in this world that we're living in. And yes, I was looking because I just realized that I don't remember hitting the button, but I did, and I am filming. You have to understand that, and I'm not talking about perception by everybody. You're always going to be a villain in somebody's story. I'm not talking about that. Okay? I'm sure you could be the nicest person in the planet and somebody will hate you. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when a group of people is constantly telling you that you're doing something that makes them feel worried, maybe you should actually study your behavior to find out what's wrong with you. Because, for example, if one person tells you you're a bully, okay. If 10 people tell you you're a bully, okay. But if 100 people tell you you're a bully and you are constantly surrounded by 200 people, that means half of the population you're surrounded with think you're a bully. Maybe you need to take a look at that. I can't wait to see what you guys think about what Dilbert's writer decided to post. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.